Well, welcome to MBA Secrets. Today, we're lucky, very lucky to have Jess Yuan here, who is an MBA candidate at Harvard Business School. Jess and I actually have an interesting connection. She was a senior associate at a private equity firm called Prospect Hill. Is that right, Jess?
That's right.
And that private equity firm actually acquired the company that I worked for, Walker Edison. So we know kind of a lot of the same colleagues and have that interesting connection. It's a very small world. But again, thank you so much for being here. Love to hear more about that background, both professional, academic, just your background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So prior to HBS, I spent 2 years first in investment banking and then 3 years immediately prior to HBS in consumer private equity. So that was in Boston, which is also kind of where I grew up. So I was excited to be back there. And that's part of I'll talk about later, but part of the reason why I wanted to go to HBS. And as you mentioned, I was on the deal team that invested in Walker Edison, but spent a lot of time in and out of the consumer and retail investing world. Walker Edison, was one really exciting one. I also spent a lot of time in, fitness, pet, beauty, a range of other consumer and retail industries. And before that, I'm a proud alumnus of the University of Virginia, where I studied finance and accounting, which is less exciting, but probably
super
unlike
exciting.
others. Yeah, super exciting. Unlike others, I think I had an MBA on my mind since I was in college. I actually took my Gmat right after graduation.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of my classmates were, traveling in Europe or Asia, and I was like locked in my room for 3 weeks to take the Gmat.
You were destined to succeed. That's amazing.
I don't know about that, but we'll take it one step at a time.
Right. Well, that's awesome. So you had an MBA in mind. So did that kind of desire start in college, or was it before that, or how did you come to that decision to get an MBA?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first seed planted in my mind was just my family is very big on education.
Gotcha.
And so for them, it's like the more education, the better, which I don't necessarily agree is true all the time. But, my dad has a PhD and a postdoctorate. So,
wow,
that's just the world that I come from. And so that was kind of the initial thought. But then as I explored it further and really thought about whether or not it was worth it and, what the value was to me, that's a whole different longer story that I'm happy to talk about, but that's how I ended up pursuing an MBA.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it. Whatever you're comfortable sharing. That's a lot of, I don't know, everybody comes to that decision differently. And I always find it so fascinating how each individual makes that decision, because it's a big decision. That's a big investment. It's a big time commitment. You have a lot of, I don't know, there's just a lot that goes into that. So we'd love to hear that.
For sure. And I think myself and probably most people who get an MBA are, huge fans and recommend to all their friends that they should go to business school. But I think in all honesty, it's kind of a personal decision you have to make for yourself. To your point, it's a huge investment in both time and money and opportunity cost. So for me personally, I think during my 5 years that I spent in banking and then private equity, a lot of that time was spent like kind of on the ground in offices with clients and portfolio companies that were family-owned businesses, entrepreneurs, owner-operators, not necessarily Fortune 500s or multinational corporations. And so I had to learn the ins and outs of their businesses and help with various projects, and not just like strategic projects from the board, but less kind of exciting day-to-day things. And I found that while models and numbers and my finance and accounting background were really important to our investment decisions, so much more of my time was just spent on relationships, right? The people aspect, like understanding how everyone was connected, who was managing who was valuable, how to hire, when to let someone go. And then on top of that, understanding strategy and ops and marketing and everything else that it takes to run a business. And, I think that was what ultimately led me to pursuing an MBA, because I just didn't have a full picture of what it took to run a business. And, if I want to do that one day, I thought that being exposed to so many different people with various backgrounds in business school would be really valuable.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, what's the point of an MBA if you don't care about that broader picture? If you were just all in on finance or accounting, then, what would be the point? So that's
exactly.
very, very interesting. So what's next for you after you graduate here? Are you interested in moving up in that same world you were in, or you mentioned maybe even kind of, some kind of entrepreneurial venture? What do you have in mind right now?
Yeah, so I came into HBS kind of thinking that I was going to return to consumer private equity.
Okay.
But that while I was here, I wanted to, do something either entrepreneurial or like on the ground, like doing ops. And so I guess I've achieved both of those. I have accepted an offer to go to it's about a $2 billion consumer fund in LA called Freeman Spogli.
Congratulations.
So I'm excited.
That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. I've never lived in California or in LA, and I'm excited for that.
Wow.
But this summer, and actually, like I was supposed to start in June and work through August, my summer internship at this, I would call it like an incubator / like VC firm / like just a consumer kind of brand umbrella. And I ended up starting in April, and instead of ending in August, I'm still working for this company. It's called Venice Brands. The founder has just built like a number of really cool brands across the food space, beauty, and CBD. So I've been working the last, I guess, 8 or 9 months at this point for him, like doing much more kind of entrepreneurial startup-y type of stuff. So, I got my experience there, and I'll take that back hopefully to, my PE career, and be able to just better be able to connect with entrepreneurs and understand like how businesses are run, and be able to, just look at the businesses we're investing in a different light.
Wow. So you bring up a thought in my mind. At my school, BYU, they literally make you sign a contract, if you will, that says you will not work, at least in that first year. You can have a job in that second year. Is that similar to HBS, or what's it like working during a full-time MBA?
Yeah, so it certainly was not my intention. When everything happened, like in March, my first thought was actually, oh no, I don't have a summer internship anymore. And I called the founder, and I was like, how's it going? And he was like, it's actually going really well. Like, we need help. And so I offered to just start then in April. Fortunate that, he's in a space that kind of did really well over the last year or so.
Right.
And, when classes moved online, I mean, this was April, right? Like everyone was still hiding for the most part in their homes, and nothing was happening. And so I had a lot of free time. Over the summer, it was a typical summer internship full time. And then when I came back to school, I think the understanding was, school was obviously full time, and then any other extra time I had, I would continue to help with the launch of some of these brands. I think it would be very tough to do more than, I don't know, 10, 20 hours a week on top of school. But there certainly are, like some of my classmates certainly do, consulting gigs or various other projects, whether it's paid or not paid, on top of school.
I mean, it's all about gaining that experience, right? And whatever you're able to carry on that plate. I mean, I can't say that I'm too upset that I'm not allowed to work. That gives me an out, because that just sounds really, really tough.
Right. It's like, I'm on vacation. Do I have to work?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I've got a really dumb one for you here. Why Harvard? I mean, it hovers around number one, right? Yeah. But that's, I mean, outside of the fact that it's incredible, what drew you specifically to Harvard?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it goes back to the point I made about deciding personally, one, whether an MBA is worth it for you, and then also whether, a specific MBA program is worth it for you. And for me, I think the calculus came down to, I'm going to leave my job, my career in PE. Hopefully I can get back to it. Maybe I can't, right? It's competitive. Right. What does it take to, what makes it worth it? And so for me, I was looking for a school that had a larger student population. I think both for networking purposes, alumni base, just access to whatever it was that people do after school. And so that kind of ruled out, I won't name programs specifically, but there are some that are much smaller and some that are larger, like HBS. And so like that's a very simple one, but size was important to me. I think secondly, knowing that I wanted to go back to PE, and knowing that it was competitive to do that, I wanted a school that had a pipeline back into the industry. And so there were only a couple that consistently, all the programs or all the firms I talked to said like every year or whenever we need to, like we go to these 2 or 3 programs.
Right. So, okay,
then,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, well,
No,
I apologize to cut you off. I just on that same vein, is that a pretty typical kind of postgraduate path that a high percentage of HBS students take, that PE route?
I wouldn't say that it's a high percentage. If you just look at the whole, I guess the whole student population as a percentage, it's not, I wouldn't say it's high, but I'd say compared to other schools, it probably is a bigger proportion,
Gotcha.
a larger proportion. I think for the most part, it's people like me who probably already came from the industry, or maybe just, they needed a vacation for 2 years. But, that was another reason why I came to business school.
Right.
For that, they're going back to the industry. That's a big percentage of people who go back into PE.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I've got, there's a couple questions that I definitely love to ask everybody, because they're universal. Everybody goes through these processes, and everybody wants to kind of know the insider secrets, right? That's why this is called MBA secrets.
Yeah.
So first here, I've mentioned on this podcast before, my process, my path to get into business school, that I took a lot of different advice, a lot of Google searches, blogs, forums, all these different things. I found a lot of information that way, but by far the best information I got was from current students, no matter what program they were in. And I'm sure you've done the same thing, is reached out to them, but that's what this is. It's a chance for listeners to reach out to students and hear what you have to say about your experience, because it's by far the best that they're going to get. So with that in mind, your application process, what kinds of things do you wish you had known at that time? And what would you tell people who are in that phase of this journey?
Yeah. What do I wish I knew at the time? I think one of them is something I've hinted at a little bit already, but taking the time to be introspective and really figure out, like, it's a very personal decision. There's rankings, all different kinds of rankings out there. All of them are different. I don't know that the rankings are as important as fit. And doing your research and talking to the students and visiting the schools and sitting in on a class and just seeing like whether or not that is an environment that you feel not just comfortable in, but like, does it challenge you?
Right.
Is it just fit your personality? I think most schools do kind of have very different characteristics. And so doing your research is important. But yeah, the introspection part, like my process, the time I spent writing my applications or essays compared to like how much time I spent just thinking about which schools to apply to. And I only ended up applying to 2. Wow. Partially because I spent a lot of time thinking about, where I would actually want to go. And then I poured all of my time and energy into those 2 applications. So I think that a lot of my friends, applied to business school after me. And that was always the advice that I gave them.
That's perfect. Follow up to that. You mentioned you spent, what was it, 3 weeks on preparing for the Gmat? And I'm assuming that was several years before you actually applied, right? Because you were in
5
I was
years. At the max.
Okay. So you hit right at the tip there. So did you find it really beneficial to take it that soon after school? Because it was, maybe you had math classes fresh in your mind, or why was that helpful or detrimental?
I'm glad you brought that up, because back like 3 years ago, I would have probably also added that as a an MBA secret. But I felt like one, just being in the mindset of coming out of college where like you're writing papers all day or like doing analytical math problem sets for econ, whatever it is, you're just in a testing mindset, which is so different than when you are working in whatever job it is. And then 2 is just time. I mean, most people take the Gmat while they're working, and that is very commendable, because I can't imagine how I would have done it, in either during my investment banking years or my private equity years. I think people manage it with like classes that force them to, actually focus, or weekend things, or tutors. But for me, like, out of college, I locked myself in my room for 3 weeks. I had no job. I had nothing to worry about. And I just like, went over the review books and took practice tests, and then just got it out of the way. That I think I probably had a huge advantage, just getting to it earlier.
That's an interesting perspective. I just, as you were talking, I mean, being in that mindset and being able to just maybe use the books saved you a ton of money too, because tutors cost thousands of dollars. And then if you don't get the score you want on the first try, then you have to do it again and go to different courses. I know I spent a lot of money. Exactly.
And you're taking time off work, and you're probably stressed from taking time off work. Again, most people take it during, while they're working, and that's amazing. I've had friends who are like, oh, like, can you help me? Like, what's the answer to this question? A couple years ago, and I would look at it and be like, I have no idea how to do this. Like all that just went in my head and out the other side. So yes, timing is important.
Yes, I would be surprised if I got any questions right if I took it today, because you just get in that mindset of studying and focusing on it.
And you learn the test. So,
yes, it's all about learning the test.
We can talk about that, but
I know that's another secret, but you bring up a great point. Okay, so now you're in your program. How long have you, when do you graduate?
This May.
Congratulations. Yeah. That's tough but exciting. Okay, so you've been there. Is it a 2-year program?
2 years. Yeah.
Okay, so you've been there for a while. Obviously a little different with the pandemic and everything, unfortunately, but I'm sure you've still been able to have an enjoyable time. But as somebody who's in the program and has spent time doing that, and maybe has seen different clubs or different social, whatever it is, what advice would you give to people who are also in the program and want to maximize that experience?
It's a great question. It's actually something that my friends and I have been talking about a lot recently, as we think about, we only have a few months left. Like, how do we maximize this? What do we regret? And it's funny because I'm going to talk about like being introspective again. I truly, before business school, like probably the least introspective person, but now all I do is just think. But I think my advice is you have to take the time to think about what matters to you while you're in your program. I mean, all MBA programs have countless things to offer. To your point, there's clubs, there's social events, there's like professional events or speakers, seminars, like everywhere you turn, you could fill your calendar up all day and be left just exhausted and probably not very happy. And I think a lot of people did that our first semester, or at least the first few weeks of the first semester, and realized that wasn't sustainable. So I think, for everyone, it's a different answer, but like, why did you leave the workforce to go back to school? Was it to hone new skills for your career? Was it to explore new career options, or to pivot? Like, did you just want to come and meet incredible people and build your network? Were you burnt out and you just wanted a break, in which case, like, maybe you should take a break. Community service important to you. So I think just being really intentional on where you spend your time, who you spend your time with, that has had, I think, the greatest payoff for me, at least, over the last few months, as I've really started to actually think about what I put on my calendar and where I spend my time.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's very good insight. Well, we've talked about a lot of things, and I think there's dozens and dozens of things that people can pick out and find as their favorite point. But for me, I just wanted to highlight what you said about introspection. You mentioned that a few times, and it was really eye-opening to me. Really look at yourself and do what you want to do. Be yourself and make sure you go forward on that path the way that you need to and you want to, not the way that maybe other people suggest you should. So from Ryan Price, thank you for saying that. That's very, very good information. With that, I know you're busy, so I'll let you go, but thank you so much, Jess, for your time.
Thanks, Ryan. This was really fun.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.